I don't really know how to do these YouTube intros where I refer back to my other work, but hello, my name is Nicole. I do knitting and sewing content mostly on Instagram, but I sometimes vlog my process here on YouTube, which is the case for today. So lately I've been kinda obsessed with matcha. And without meaning to, I think that I just had matcha on my mind, and while I was getting yarn cones, I bought a color that looks exactly like matcha, which is this one, and I really want to make a cardigan with it. I have a cardigan that I bought around last year that I really like, which is also in mohair, so I think I'm going to take inspiration from that one just to take the measurements and figure out what my pattern pieces are. So yeah, this is the cardigan. So let's head over to this table so that we can figure out what the plan is. Before I get to the calculations and my thought process behind creating the pattern for this cardigan, I just want to let you know that you can find the plans for this cardigan on my store as a pay what you can file, so you can get it for free. You just need to change the price to 0. I created these plans because I thought it would be a little bit hard to follow the final result of my calculations, and because I did some changes while I was knitting it, so the number of stitches and rows for some sections that I tell you on the calculations aren't exactly the ones that I ended up doing, so you can have access to the plans to know what I ended up doing exactly. I hope this helps in case you want to make this cardigan for yourself, and if you want to see what's my thought process, just keep on going. Okay, so I have done a few swatches to figure out what I want to do. So on this cardigan, as you can see, the gauge swatch is pretty small. I don't have a ribber on my knitting machine, so I wasn't ready to manually do each purl stitch. So I think I'm going to go for a mock rib, which is basically this, where you skip every other stitch and the stitch where you don't knit kind of looks like a purl stitch on a rib. So this is what I tried here, and I really like the look of it, but I want to do it folded like it's in here. It just looks much neater, and I don't really like the cast on edge that it leaves here. Also, I did the tension swatches with tension 1 on this one and with tension 3 on this one, and I think I'm going to go for this one just because it will be more fluid like the original one. I could go up in the tension, but I also want to be able to wear this cardigan when it's a little bit colder outside, so it being a little bit tighter will work in my favor. Also, on this cardigan, it has a folded edge for the button band, and I could do that by knitting extra stitches that I will then fold to create the button band, but I need to do increases right at the edge, so to do that I will have to move all the stitches from the button band to the side to create the increases. I don't really want to do that because this is a super small tension, so just for the button band I will have a lot of stitches, so it doesn't really seem practical. I think I'm just going to knit the button bands separately and then I'll sew it to the body of the cardigan. Basically, I'm just going to ignore all of these swatches. I just need this one to figure out my tension and how many stitches I have in a 10 by 10 centimeter square. So the first thing I'm going to do is count how many stitches I have, and then we'll get back to take the measurements for the cardigan. Okay, so I know how many stitches I have in 4 centimeters, and I just need to know how many I have in 10 centimeters, so I'm just going to calculate that. In 4 centimeters you have 17 stitches, so you need to figure out how many stitches you have in 10 centimeters, so you just multiply 10 by 17 and divide by 4. So that means that I have 42.5 stitches in 10 centimeters. So I'm just going to round that to 43 stitches. And for the rows, we just have to do the same. So I just need to change this to the amount of rows. So it's 10 by 24 divided by 4. It's 60 rows. This just means that in the future, when I want to calculate, for example, how many stitches I have in 30 centimeters, I just have to multiply the amount of centimeters by 4.3 for the stitches and by 6 for the rows. And that's all we need to translate the measurements into stitches and rows. So first off, for the drop shoulder design, I'm just going to start at the back and I'm going to do short rows to create this excess fabric that you can see at the top. If it was a straight line, it would start around here, but you cast on the amount of stitches at the back, and then you're going to knit back and forth until you reach the last stitch at the edge to create this excess fabric. So that's what I'm going to do. So first off, I'm just going to draw my pattern pieces on my sketchbook so that I can then associate each measurement to each pattern piece. So for the back, this is basically the shape. This is the neck, these are the shoulders, and as I'm not doing any armhole shaping, it will just go straight down. That's it. And it will have the mock rib at the bottom. So for the back, keep in mind that we have to account for the neckband, so I'm just going to measure from here, and this is the whole neck until here. So I'm going to measure the back, and it's around 17.5 for the shoulder, and for the neck it's 22 centimeters. On this shoulder we have exactly the same measurement as the other one, and now I'm just going to measure the armhole opening at the back. Which is 23 centimeters. And then the rest of the body, which is 24 centimeters. Now for the ribbing, I don't want it to be as wide as this one. I want to be a tiny bit shorter, so this one measures 7 centimeters. I want mine to be 5.5, so I'm going to add it here. 5.5. For the front, I already know how many stitches I have for the armhole, so what I need to measure is the neckline increases stop before the armhole stops, so I'm going to take that into account. And what I need to know is the difference between this measurement and this measurement to figure out how many stitches I'm going to increase to get to this point. So let me just draw the front. Again, like the back, there aren't any increases or decreases at the armhole, so I'm just going to go straight down. And also, I'm not going to do my front pattern piece at a slope. I will just rely on the short rows at the back to do that for me at the front, so basically this piece is straight, but once it has been sewn to the back you won't see this as a straight line. It will come down at a slope as well as this one. So I already know what's the distance here, which is 17.5 centimeters. I know that my armhole is 23 centimeters and I know that it stops below. So here it's 23 centimeters. So I know that we stop shaping the neckline before the armhole stops. So I need to know what's the measurement from here to here. It's 22 centimeters, but keep in mind that, as I said, this will be straight, not at a slope as it is original on this cardigan. So I'm going to decrease that measurement to 20 centimeters. And I need also to know what's the distance from here to here to know how many stitches I have to increase for the neckline. So from here to here we have 25 centimeters. Okay, so the width of the front is 25 centimeters and I know that the shoulder is 17.5, so the difference between those two measurements divided by the number of rows that this will give me will be the number of increases that I will have to do. So I'm just going to translate all of these into stitches and rows so that we can start figuring out the increases. So again, to calculate this, I just need to know every measurement that's horizontal will be stitches and every measurement that it's vertical will be rows. This doesn't work for every project, but for this one specifically, that's how it goes. But if you're knitting something sideways, it will depend. So for this one, for example, for the back, it's 22 centimeters times 4.3. It will give me 94.6. So that would be 95 stitches for the back. Then for the shoulders, 17.5 times 4.3. It's 75 stitches. I'm just going to calculate the sum of these three to figure out what's the width of my back. So it's 95 plus 75 plus 75, which is 245. And my knitting machine comes with 160 needles, so I have to figure out how I'm going to do this. Let me just check how many stitches I have as the width for the front. So 25 times 4.3, it would be 108 stitches. So I think what I'm going to do is divide the back in two, and I will have to knit these two pieces separately and then join them at the center, which is not really a big deal, and also it can look cool as a design feature at the back, so not really a problem. What I need to do is just that I'm going to divide 95 2, and I'm going to put 48 stitches for each side so that I have the extra stitch at the center to join them together. So for this one, it will be 48 for each side. And here it's basically the same. I will be doing short rows, but instead I will do as you would partial knitting on a knitting machine. So I will start here, then I'll go back and work back and forth, but I won't be wrapping anything on this side. I'll just keep a straight line down. I hope that makes sense, but I'll show you the pieces so that you can visualize it. So now let's figure out the number of rows at the back. So for the armhole, it's 23 times 6. So it's 138 rows for the armhole, and for the body, this said 24 centimeters, but I'm going to remove the length of the mock rib to figure out how much I have just on this section. So it's 24 minus 5.5, which is 18.5 centimeters, and I'm going to time that by 6, which is 111 rows. Then for the mock rib, we have 5.5 centimeters, which is 33 rows. For the front, we know that we also have 33 rows for the mock rib. We know that we have 111 rows for the body, and we know that we have 138 rows for the armhole. For the shoulder, it's the same measurements as this one, so we have 75 stitches. And now we're going to calculate how many rows we have in 20 centimeters, which is just 20 times 6, 120 rows. And we want to know what's the difference between the total width and the shoulder width. So it's 108 stitches minus 75 stitches, which is 33 stitches that I have to increase, and I will have to figure out what's the interval between each increase. 120 rows divided by 33 stitches, it means that I will have to increase every 3.6 rows. That's not really possible, so I'm going to increase every 3 rows. And that's because, as I said previously, I have a slope at the back, but the front is straight. So I think that I will have to do a few rows right at the top, because the slope will start at my back, not right at my shoulder line. So I have to add a little bit of excess fabric here to account for that. So my increases actually will start a little bit later. So let me just measure how many rows I will need just straight to figure out if this number will change, and that will change the number of increases. Oh yeah, I just measured on my mannequin, and from where the slope will be at the back and where my shoulder line is, I will have to knit 5 centimeters. If 10 centimeters are 60 rows, then 5 centimeters will be 30 rows. And instead of 120 rows, we'll have 90 rows. So 108 minus 75 is 33 increases that I have to do, and 90 divided by 33, it's 2.72. I'll still increase every 3 rows, because even if I have to lower the v-neck just a little bit, I'm not bothered by a v-neck that goes until the armhole point, so it's okay. And then for the sleeves, usually when you have a straight armhole, it won't be too much of a problem if you do a straight sleeve, and by that I mean that the sleeve doesn't have any sort of shaping at the top, but I think that I still want to do just a tiny bit of a short row, just so that I don't get too much bunching up at the armhole when I'm wearing it. This one is super light, but one I'm making will be just a little bit thicker, so I don't want that to happen. And if you look at this sleeve, you'll see that there is a little bit of shaping, because if you follow the straight line of stitches, you can see that there's a little bit of excess fabric here. So we know that for each armhole we had 23 centimeters, so we have to multiply by that by 2, so 23 times 2 it's 46 centimeters, and we have to turn these into stitches, so 46 centimeters will be 197.8. This is also more than what my knitting machine can handle in terms of number of needles, so I'm going to have to divide the sleeve by 2 again. Okay, so I have 198 basically. 198 divided by 2, it's 99 stitches for each side, and I still want to do a little bit of shaping. It doesn't need to be too much, so what I'm going to do is I will leave the center of the short row as 10 centimeters, which will be 43 stitches, and that's divided by 2, it's 21, so 22 stitches on each side. Okay, so I'm just measuring the armhole to have a visual, so basically the curve would start here, and I would like it to go, the part that will be unworked when it comes to short rows will be from here to here, which will be around 8 centimeters. I'm really guesstimating these. Basically, when you look at pattern pieces for an extended amount of time, you kind of have a visual of how things will look. So I can't really explain to you why I'm choosing exactly 8 centimeters and not 9 or 10. I'm just looking at it and it seems like it will be right, basically. So I'm sorry if it isn't much help, but... So for the part that's unworked, I will have 34 stitches on each side, and I'm just going to calculate what's the difference. So 34 plus 22 minus 99 stitches, it's 43 stitches that I will have here. So this is the stitches that I will be working, and to figure out how many turns I will do, I'm just going to see where the stitches follow a straight line here, and I will calculate the difference. So it's around 4.5 centimeters, and that would be 4.5 times 6. It would be 27 rows that I have to work. And 43 divided by 27, I would have to turn every 1.59 rows to achieve that. So I'm going to turn every 2 rows, and it will give me somewhat the same. Then for the length, we have 45 centimeters, so 45 centimeters times 6, it's 270 rows, and we know that the width of our sleeve is 23 times 2, so it's 46 centimeters, and I know that the bottom is, I'm going to measure before the cuff because the cuff is always smaller, and I'm only going to do increases until the cuff. So this part is around 11 centimeters, so 22 centimeters at the bottom. I'm just going to write here 22 centimeters, so it's 95 stitches. 95 divided by 2, it's 48 stitches for each side. So I know that between 99 and 48 stitches, I will have to do 51 decreases to achieve this number. And I know that I have 270 rows to do so. So I'm going to divide 270 rows by 51 stitches, and that means I have to decrease every 5 rows. Okay, that's basically it for my plans. Then the other thing I have to do is just the neckband, and that I will do at the end, just because I'm tired of calculating stuff. I hope this wasn't too much information, but for me it was. I'm just going to have lunch and then we'll get back to the knitting machine.
And would rather think of himself first and foremost as an actor and, of course, comedian. Sorry, but I'm making you...
So the first thing I'm going to do is cast on the back, and again I'm doing the back separately in 2 parts. The only thing I have to push my needles is this one, but it's for 1x1 rip or for 2x1 rip, so I have to do it in sections, but still faster than doing it by hand.
She's already socialized with other dogs. She's very friendly. Like, yeah, she just like will straight up dominate this like 5-6-year-old dog all the time. It's very annoying.
He's pretty slick with
Yeah,
the dialogue.
yeah. When you talk to like, I mean, I show there's a photo of it on my alt account of like the gunk afterwards, but not the video.
Let me see.
What was the conversation we had about doctors and steady hands?
I don't know.
I forget. It was a while back.
They're supposed to have steady hands, I think.
No.
We have breaking news. Jimmy Lee's Instagram.
So I finished both back pieces and I realized that I made a mistake in my calculations. So from here to here I counted 23 centimeters for the armhole opening, but the shoulders will drop at the back, so I have a little bit of excess fabric. So I counted how many rows I have in the short row shaping and I subtracted that, and as you can see here, this would be where my armhole is, and on this side it's already in the correct spot. So the amount of rows, which is 78, I'll have to do at the front piece to compensate here, and then start the neckline shaping and add those 78 rows to the front piece for the armhole so that they match and encounter here. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to start at one of the fronts now, and I think I'm going to pick up stitches along the shoulder just so that I can reduce the amount of sewing that I have to do. So I finished the body of the cardigan, and this is as far as we're getting today, and tomorrow I'm going to do the sleeves. I think I'm going to pick up the stitches around the armhole, just like I did with the shoulders, just to again eliminate any sewing, because that takes quite a while to do, and these are such small stitches that it would be just too much. So I'm going to do that tomorrow, so I'll place the stitches where the armhole is on the knitting machine and I'll knit from there. I just finished the 2 pattern pieces for the sleeves on one of the sides, so now I have to seam the center of the sleeve together to actually have a whole sleeve. I'm going to seam it together using a matcha stitch, but it's so many stitches, so we'll see if I change the plan.
What do you like cooking shows?
No idea.
Do you cook?
Nope.
Just watch the shows.
Yep.
I ended up not seaming the sleeve together, but I did seam the back, just because I always get to this point when I'm knitting a cardigan where I just really want to see what it looks like with the neckline. So I think I'm going to calculate the neckline to figure out where the buttons are, and I think I'm going to knit that before I knit the other sleeve and before I seam it together. Also, after seaming the sleeves together, I still have to add the mock rib at the edge, just because I didn't want to seam the mock rib down the center of the sleeve because it's a super visible part, so I'm going to seam them together and then add the mock rib. So yeah, I'm going to do the calculations and then I'll get back to you. So here's what I'm thinking when it comes to knitting the button band. I want to do a folded button band, but I'm going to sew it to the cardigan. So what I want to do is create a piece of fabric that it's double the width that I want for my neckband. So this would be the fold line for the neckband. And then for the buttonholes, I'm going to do them on both sides, so that when I fold the neckband, they align and I can sew the neckband to the body while having the buttonholes aligning on both sides. Then on the other side of the cardigan, it's going to be just plain, and I'm going to sew each button on the other side that corresponds to the buttonhole. I hope that makes sense, but that's my plan. Now I just need to figure out how wide I want my neckband to be, and then I can just multiply that by 2 and figure out these calculations to see how many stitches I have on each side of the buttonhole. So I played around with the fabric in the cardigan, and I think I want my neckband to be 15 stitches on each side, so the total will be 30 stitches. Oh no, I need it to be an even number on both sides, so I'll do 32 stitches so that I can have 16 on each side. And then I'm going to divide this by 2, so I'll have to knit 8 stitches, 16 stitches at the center and 8 stitches on the other side. And I'm going to do partial knitting so that I can create these openings for the buttonhole. So I'm going to cast on the 32 stitches, which is 16 stitches on each side. I know that I want to do the buttonholes with partial knitting, but I don't exactly know how that will look like while knitting, so I'll figure out as I go. I know that I'm going to knit the first 15 rows plain, and then I'll start separating for the buttonholes. First, let's cast on the 32 stitches. So for my buttonhole, I know I have to work the first 8 stitches for 8 rows. So we're going to do that. I'm going to count the needles, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and all of the remaining stitches won't be worked. So I'll just be working over these stitches. And to keep track, I'll just cross over the rows that I've done. So I have to knit 8 rows. I'm just going to lower you a little bit so that you can see the openings that this partial knitting is creating, and I'm sorry if you can hear construction noise. So as you can see here, I've worked 8 rows, so it's creating a hole, and now I have to knit 8 rows of 16 stitches. So I'm going to push these ones forward, and the thing with this technique is that I'm going to have a few ends, so I'll have to do some sewing at the end to hide this. So the first 8 won't be worked at this time, so I'm going to count 16 stitches. So I'll insert a new yarn so that I can knit the 8 rows that I need at the center. Okay, so I have 8 rows at the center, and now I have to knit the remaining 8 stitches for 8 rows again. So I'm going to push these needles forward and place the remaining 8 needles in working position. Cut the yarn and insert the new yarn to knit the 8 rows. So I have 8 rows on each side, and now I'm just going to knit all the stitches, which will close the buttonhole. So again, I need to cut the yarn, and I'm going to reset my counter to 0 and cross the first 8 rows, which I have already done. And now I'm going to knit 33 rows. So I'm just going to push all of the needles to working position. Insert a new yarn. So now I'm just going to keep working the same way. So now I finished the 33 rows, so I'm going to do again the partial knitting for 8 rows on each buttonhole, and then again until I have 4 buttonholes. And when I'm done, I'm going to cast off and steam it so that we can see the finished result. And my plan is that once I fold it, let me see if I can show you, but once I fold it, I want to sew the edges of the buttonhole to the one that's on the wrong side, just so that it doesn't open up, and I think it will be just neater overall. So yeah, I'm just going to keep working on this, and I'll show you once it's done. It's longer than the neckline of the cardigan, so I'm a little bit afraid, but we've seen how this fabric behaves when it's steam blocked, so let's cross our fingers. One thing that I would also do in the future is add more stitches to the side that I'm going to sew to the cardigan, just because I didn't remember that I'm going to lose 1 stitch, so the buttonhole won't be centered. So instead of 8 at the edge, I would do probably 10. just to make it more centered. But it's not really a huge problem, to be honest.
There's 3 minutes left still. But she's a far way off though, I feel like, emotionally evolving.
Yeah.
Because it takes
The rhythm change.
time stood still. Yeah, it's true.
So that part's weird too.
Yeah, but well,
Maybe it was outside the restaurant.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was just outside the restaurant.
Okay, yeah, it could have been.
Like, it kissed me on the mouth. Everyone wants me. I think this fucking book is supposed to falling out, isn't it? Whatever.
Cancels the Wax Art Museum when we're like 10 minutes away from me. Like, you're so late. Like, why aren't you here? Like, we're gonna be done by now. And she's already dumped me stranded in main streets of Dublin, which is terrifying. And I was 15 at this stage. And
she's like extremely spiteful. How else would you describe Colleen? Because
Explain why he's so horribly researched. He's like, I cannot.
Never watch anything.
I cannot watch.
So I've just finished this cardigan after I don't even know how many days, and it's all done. I'm just going to put it on so that you can see what it looks like, but I'll also insert some footage so that you can see it fully. I really enjoy how it turned out, and the yarn is super soft. This is a cashmere and acrylic blend. As you saw by the footage, there was a lot of seaming on this cardigan, especially because I had to divide the sleeves and the back into 2 separate pieces. And as you saw, I did it all by hand. I got a few messages on Instagram asking if I wouldn't consider sewing it with a machine, and in future projects I totally would, because this does take quite a lot of time. But I really enjoy how it turned out on the seams on the inside. They are very minimal, so you don't really feel them while wearing the garment, which is something that I enjoy. The only thing I have to say when it comes to fit is that I would just prefer it if it was a little bit wider at the wrist, but nothing major, and I wasn't planning on wearing this cardigan with long sleeves underneath either way, so I think it will work out. I really love how the mock rib turned out. I didn't think that I could achieve this kind of look without the ribber, but it looks really good, and I'll definitely do this again in other knitting projects with the knitting machine. I think I want to make another cardigan like this, but I'll use the chunky machine because I want more of a thicker fabric for the winter. I don't know if any of you will use the plans that I have available, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. And again, the plans are available as a pay which you can download, so if you want to get them for free, you just need to change the price to 0 and add them to your cart, so it's totally free. My cat is. I hope you enjoyed watching the process, and I'll be back with more videos like this one if you enjoy, so let me know down below. I have one that I shared about 2 weeks ago if you want to see it, and my cat is saying that it's time to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Bye!
He's like, man, check these guys out, so smart, so good.
What is it about your message do you think